Da da da! What's my good chair? Welcome, everybody. I just had an image when I did that. And this is my intro almost every single day. It's my little bit of disbursement, a little bit of, right, that little bit of extra that we have left. And I know that I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'll be all re energized and ready to go about my day. But if there's a little bit extra, right? And I don't know where it's going, I don't know how it's going to manifest, but I'm just going to throw it out there anyway. And that's usually what I do. But I have the same intro. I know I have 5 seconds to grab your attention when I come in live in that opportunity to possibly get another 5 seconds of your time. But just before I was saying that and I just came in and I just had a funny thought because usually when I do that da 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 what's my good cheer, I have this image of superhero. I have a cape on, lots of times when I go to work, I would do that also, but it was just in a signal like I'm coming in to save the day. And sometimes it's just in showing up, and the person in front of you is just like, oh, I wish somebody would come by and we could just have a conversation. I could just use a little bit of company right now. And then they say, oh, right. Cindy hasn't gone live yet, right? She'll be in soon. And then to have that feeling, right? Because that's the feeling that I'm trying to hit because it's in that desperation because lots of us do feel sometimes in that desperation when we are confused, when we're worried, when we're stressed, when we feel lonely, when we feel destitute or heartbroken or just done, right? And sometimes it is just in that little bit of company. There are lots of times in my life that I wish I had somebody that I could talk to, somebody that I could unload some of my ideas, some of my problems, maybe some of those reflections on myself that I come to learn that probably was not true. But because I had lived that way, because I had thought that way, because I had experienced that way, and because I didn't have anybody to reflect anything different to me, I took on a lot of untruths in my life. Today, we're going to try and stay on the topic of change. And I thought I would take a little bit of a look in it in the aspect because I try to use my own experiences in my own life. I'm not a big fan of change, but for me, if I know the change is coming, I have this little pep talk with myself, this little cheerleader, just kind of this little console, right? Console with myself. And I look at it as a new opportunity. I look at change as something that's going to maybe produce something bigger or better than what the last thing I'm coming out of had to offer. So, for me myself, I went to a lot of schools growing up. My dad was a bit of a no, that's putting it mildly. My dad was a big nomad. One of his favorite things to do were to buy houses, right? Move the family in it and then put it up for sale right away and then just scoop out profits in that. He did love real estate. My dad was an entrepreneur, but he would do anything to bring in those funds. And again, my dad was a compulsive gambler, so my dad probably had a pretty good flow going on, going in and going out, going in and going out. And that's true. I remember as a kid, we Saturday mornings we'd get up. One of our favorite things to do was to run to Dad's wallet. And if he had a great big fat wallet, we were getting movie money and popcorn money and maybe a new pair of jeans, right? And if there was nothing in that wallet, then possibly it was Kraft dinner or a 25-pound bag of rice for the month until Dad could resolve whatever situation he put us in. Now you have to remember, this is coming from the experience of a child, right? And I'm looking at it by going back into my experience, my memories, some of those conversations and adventures and experiences that I had. And I'm trying to put myself in, right, those other characters' shoes, right? And I'm calling them characters because I come to realize that, for the most part, these people that I really thought I knew, that they were blood, that they were family, they were friends, they were co-workers, they were lifelines that possibly I put more weight into those relationships than they did. And not going to feel bad for that. I think that's actually a really good trait to have. And it's also a way to remind myself, right, that you did, for the most part, look at the bright side of things, right? To look at the positive, to be that person. And when I was looking at what I wanted to bring online to my YouTube channel, I'm going little down side branches, but it all comes together. I was looking at what I wanted to bring, because I knew, right, I wasn't going to be able to explore abandoned farms, abandoned houses, right? I wouldn't be able to be roaming out in farm fields for 30 or 40 years. If I thought I could go 30, 40 years doing that and building my brand and my YouTube channel, I might have done that, right? I wasn't woke to some different ideas at all, when I started my YouTube channel. I just wanted to be a YouTube superstar. But life picked me up and swept me along. And because I'm adapt and conquered, in the most part, I had no idea what I was stepping myself into. But that curiosity, it got me a little bit. And for a lot of people, I understand it is a scary experience. For me, I just kind of made myself as comfortable as I could in that process, because little answers, right? Little lessons, little prerequisites to the next little tidbit that I would get that would help me feel more comfortable and would offer up more direction for, well, where I was going, and also new opportunities, right? Understanding that I was changing, and change is nothing new to me. I will adapt, I will ride the waves, right? Not a big fan of change in the moment, but like I said, I give myself these little prep talks, and right, and I look at it as a new opportunity to start over. They call it pivot, right? When you are making those kinds of big changes. I used to call it a 360, but my sister Tracy, she says, Cindy, it's not a 360, because if you're doing a 360, you're going right back to the start. You're doing a full turnaround. Says you're either doing a 180, which you're going to the other end of the spectrum, or you may be doing a 45. I like the 45s. The 45s are where I sit. So staying on the topic of change tonight, it's where I wanted to come at in making those moves myself before life cranks me, before life says, oh my goodness, Cindy's not moving. Look at her. She's just sitting there, not budging. If we don't throw this catastrophe into her life, if we don't bring about this one aspect of change, she's not going to change. She's not going to make any movement at all. It's all fine and dandy that I can sit here and take in the lessons, but you have to put those lessons into practice. You have to put the action. Otherwise, it is in that mindset of the guilt. The guilt because I enjoy the work that I do. It doesn't feel like work to me, and it's not anything in the sense of physicality in that. It's not like I'm going for a jog and having a sweat, right? That movement is, for the most part, I'm doing this in my brain, in the lessons. I feel like I'm in school. And if you look at that, school is work, isn't it? But at the same time, when you go to school, you usually have a part-time job. Okay, so we're coming back to this idea of change now. I'm trying to put some 45-degree turns into my life because I'm in a bit of I don't know if it's a limbo or a standstill. It's a little bit maybe procrastination, but I'm not one to make those kind of big stupid moves, those gamble moves, right? Because I'm not a gambler anymore, right? I'm not a gambler anymore. I do take risk, you guys know, right? I quit that job to put the roof over my head that allowed me to stay worry free, knowing that I had a roof over my head because the rent was being paid and the bills were being paid. So it gave me all my free time outside of my job to be able to apply myself in this. But in taking my own lessons, I've changed, right? And what kind of example would I be to anybody else if I didn't heed my own lessons? Not every lesson, my perspective, those lessons that I believe to be true, that I have faith that they were either the problem or the solution, and that I was willing to experiment in those, right? Right? Just make a decision, just bring about that change myself. And if you do it in a 43-degree angle, it's a nice soft curve. You're not going off the end of the cliff. It isn't like it's not a crank. It's a little bit of an experiment, isn't it? Because we initiated the change. And sometimes in initiating the change, right, it's just enough that the change that we didn't get right, or in that completion or that extra that was supposed to be tagged onto that we didn't do, that's all that will be directed at us. So it won't be a 360. It won't be a 180. It might be another 45 degree. It might be another couple 45 degrees. I tell you, I take 6 45 degrees rather than one crank any day, because those cranks are painful, scary, and full of stress for the most part, right? And confusion lots of times. So when it comes to this change, I just wanted to say, like it is in those baby steps that we make, that we give ourselves a little bit of say, right? A little bit of choice in the direction that we want to go. A little bit of choice in how much we can bear in the moment, because all we have to do is bear. All we have to do is put that action towards it. It doesn't say that you have to put like every single sweat and tear in that second, but you got to get yourself motivated somehow. I've got to get myself motivated somehow, or I have to switch my mindset to say, okay, Cindy, right? This is your work. This is work, right? There's no reason to feel bad because you're not out there jogging and you're not putting in a good hard 8 hours for somebody else. You're putting those 8 hours in for yourself. So I'm not a gambler, but I did take a risk, didn't I, in quitting that job that put a roof over my head. I, in my own way of an attempt to do a 45-degree turn, and it's not really, right? I took a risk. I planned it out the best I could. I put as much cush underneath when I knew I was dangling and I knew I was going to fall, but it was just how I was going to fall, right? Sometimes you just, in that preparedness, can only do what you can do. And sometimes it isn't enough. But sometimes it is. And it's just in the perspective, or it's just in the patience. It's just in because we always want things yesterday and we're not willing to wait for it. So sometimes it's just in the fact that we get a little bit nervous of when's it going to happen, right? And sometimes we just don't have a say in that. For the most part, we don't have a lot of say in that, right? But those little 45-degree turns when there's nothing going on in the moment, when we feel like we're being in a standstill, when we feel guilty because, right, that we don't feel like we're building up any kind of momentum because we don't see the change coming about in our lives. Again, it's in being patient with that, but at the same time, just being persistent, just being consistent, right? It's like me doing my very best. And, I'm not 100%. I do fail. Sometimes I just say, oh my goodness, I just can't do it, right? Oh my goodness, you should have seen the guilt surface this morning. Not only guilt surfaced this morning, but shame surfaced this morning. I took a nap uh, uh, day before yesterday. I took a nap and I ended up taking a little bit of a sleep rather than a nap, and I threw off my sleeping habits. So what did I do? Right? I just went to bed really, really late and I set my alarm up for the regular time, and then I just had a long, exhausting day and I was ready for bed last night, and I was all proud of myself that, right, I wanted to go to bed. I wanted to take another nap, but I didn't because I knew I can't mess with my sleeping. It took me a while to build that habit up. And it was one of the very best habits that I could have done for myself. And that is a truth. And it was one of my very first habits, just to set a good sleep routine for myself. And I am a good sleeper. I've always been a good sleeper. I don't attribute the routine to a good sleep, but I attribute the routine to getting my life back in order, to be able to appreciate a day and not to sleep through it, right? Uh, and also, you gave me an inch, I would take a mile, right? I could easily be that person to just stay in bed all day if you let me. And, one of the very first lessons I got, get my sleeping habits. And I've been getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning now for at least 6 years. And I worked bars and nights clubs my entire life. And I would be going to bed at 7 o'clock, make my husband's lunch, hang out with him a little bit before he went to work, and then I'd crawl into bed and I would sleep all day. I did that for years. I was quite set and comfy in that routine, but that routine was not serving me well because, well, it kept me from the rest of the world. Because when you live on that night owl, um, right, I'm looking out my window right now and the skyscrapers and everything, all the lights are off and everything. Everybody's gone to bed already. So, I am that person appreciates that alone time, but it's not healthy to be alone, right? But I made some choices and I made some good choices, but I make bad choices too, right? But I have learned, right, to utilize those tools around my belt and just do the very best that I can. And I was listening to my lessons when I had that experience and that experiment and that confidence that I was making the best decision in the moment. And I have to stay convinced that I did, right? Because why? I believe, right? I believe in the lessons. I believe that I did the right thing. I believe that I'm not supposed to be around, right? That which wants to take me down. Because if you're in the negative, right, you're going to be in the negative, right? You can't make any movement in that. You can't come to the surface. You can't form a thought. You can't make a movement. It just really, really sucks. And it's something that I did my entire life being around these characters and not even knowing it. And, there is no surprise that I woke up so late in my life to some of these ideas because I was so low. There was no chance that any of these ideas could have or would have come across my path, right? So many things got me here, right? But it is in my choices that it's going to initiate the change that I want to come in my life. And, it's in those standstills that we can really recognize where we're at in our life. At the very least, you can recognize where you are at in your life. And in that moment, you can make a choice, right? And just put that action in right as soon as you make that thought, as soon as you make that choice, you put that action into it and go into another direction because that's a choice you made, right? That's not something that was dictated to you. You're not cleaning up an accident. You're not cleaning up somebody's mess. You're not being um, squashed. You're not being sheep herded, right? This is something you decided. And so there's lots of positive in that, right? There's that sense of accomplishment, that sense of bravery, right? Because change is not comfortable. It isn't comfortable, right? But once you've gone through it, once you've experienced it, if you have to do it again, right? It's not so bad. It's not going to say it's going to be perfect, right? But eventually, right, it won't be bad. I tell you, when I first started on YouTube, it took over a year for me to be able to bring up the confidence and the bravery to come in front of the camera. It really did. And it was only in that practice, it was only in showing up every single day, it was in making those small choices, right? That were in actuality big choices. Just the fact that I was showing up every day, right? And that built that comfortableness that I have right now. Sometimes I think maybe too comfortable, but I think this is where I shine. This is right. And this is where I can build that relationship with myself, and also at the same time being that example to others, maybe build that trust and those relationships that we all so desperately need. But sometimes, right? You're sitting here and you're looking out your window and you don't see a light, everything's just black, right? You know you're spending too much time on your own, and it's time to make some choices, right? Some choices that will promote some change in our lives. And I know from my own experience that, right, especially in the past half a dozen years, so if I don't make those choices for myself, those choices will be made for me. And if they're not made for me, then maybe it's a missed opportunity, because, right, I was meant to take that action myself. I was meant to drum up that courage myself. It wasn't meant to be served to me by something or someone else, right? Okay, I'm going to leave it right there, and we'll come back. We'll come back tomorrow. We're just going to stay on the topic change, right? I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of food for thought in how to look at it when you have a dream. You have something that you would wish for yourself, or wish for your family, or wish for the your present situation that you're in, right? That sometimes we just sit there and we wait for somebody else to swoop in and save the day. I know what that's like. I've had those beautiful characters in my life who did that for me, right? And did that to me, right? Because I wasn't doing for myself, right? I was allowing others to do it for me. And that's for another story, but I just wanted to just relate, that sometimes when we make these small movements ourselves, we're still making movement. And sometimes we think it's just a small movement, but right? Sometimes it's like a set of dominoes and they just go off, and right? Just things are just clicking. Doesn't always work out that way. Halfway through the domino fall, right? Something will go out of whack and it may all collapse upon itself. But, right, we always have an opportunity to try, and we got a little bit further, right? We know how to get to that point now, right? So we just a matter of just carrying on. It's a matter of just, right, introducing other aspects and other ideas and just putting that little bit of action in it, just to see, right, if we can get a little bit further even next time, right? Be awesome if you could just knock over that one domino and it just goes, right? All the loops, and yes, right? And at the end, it just collapses perfectly, right? And then you see all your hard work, right, manifest into something amazing. And that's true. It's right. That set of dominoes, it did collapse. It's done, right? You're not going to put in that work to do something you've already done, something that you've already accomplished, right? That was the prerequisite. Now you can go to an even bigger one, right? Something more challenging. And if you initiate that yourself by deciding what you would like to do, won't be dictated to you by maybe something that somebody else wants to do. Okay, you guys, that's it. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a great night. And yeah, we'll stick on change.